Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. On the last segment, I showed you instruments of many colors. I've been bringing in different groups of instruments to show you various things about them. And then I think it was the last segment or the segment before, I brought you in all kinds of instruments with all kinds of colors. And you can get instruments in all kinds of colors, particularly the plastic ones, because you can make plastic in any color you want. So I brought this in just to kind of remind you, this is a Peruvian flute, and it's hand painted and it's hand carved and it's beautiful and it's bright red. So I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it, a bamboo flute painted. But you know, with all of the colors that I've shown you, and I'm going to put this down for a while, with all the colors that I've shown you, what about the normal instruments that are not unique in any way? For example, the saxophones, the clarinets, the oboes, the bassoons, and the flutes. What kind of coloring do they have? I know that most people, when they buy instruments, want something that's bright and shiny. With plastics, you can get any color you want, but a lot of these instruments are brass instruments, and you can't get any color that you want unless you want to get a plastic saxophone, and I do believe they make them, but I've never seen one. And I know they make plastic sousaphones, and I've never seen those either, but they do have some brass instruments that traditionally are brass, but occasionally they make them in plastic, usually for children who may bang around an instrument and be careless as to how they handle them. But a lot of these instruments that we see, flutes and clarinets, oboes and bassoons, they're going to be brass instruments, saxophones, clarinets, and flutes particularly. They're going to be brass instruments. And so I decided that I would continue on the color situation here that I started and talk about the way that they actually plate and lacquer instruments, because you're not going to get such a variety of color with the brass instruments that are regular instruments as you will with the plastic ones. And when you get to the wood instruments, oboe and bassoon, of course, are wood, they're going to be brownish or they're going to be blackish. So I'm going to take this segment and basically talk about the flutes and how they lacquer them. I'm going to give you a set of definitions as to what this process is, but let me show you some flutes first. And I just want to mention that for lacquering and for brass instruments, you're going to get them in gold, silver, copper, or nickel. Those are the four colors that you're going to get. And with the silver and the nickel, you may not find as much difference in the way that they look, but they're all bright and they're all shiny. And then, of course, when you get to other instruments, then the copper, that's an element in itself. So let me show you some of these instruments of those colors, and you can see how bright they can be and how shiny they can be. I guess I'll start off with the carriage horn. I've had it in here before. The carriage horn is copper. Now, copper is an element. I tried polishing it last night so I could get it to be as shiny as it could be, but it's an element. This could be plated. It could be lacquered. There is a little section here that's gold. I don't know if the camera can pick that up. It's just a small section, but it's gold. So it can be plated, but this is copper. It's a copper instrument. The mouthpiece of this instrument is also gold. It looks like a brass mouthpiece like you would use in a trombone or you would use in, in a trumpet. It's a smaller type of mouthpiece, but that's what it is. So when you get instruments that look like this is a copper one. I'm going to turn it around and just face one of the cameras and tip it a little to see if you can see the color a little bit better. You can't see in it. I could see in it. But this is what it is. Good. Very, very good. That's exactly what I need. And you can see the color. Copper is beautiful, and you can sometimes get copper on trumpets and other brass instruments. I think it's beautiful. Now, this is very, very, very old. It has a history to it. I don't know the history, but they use these instruments when they, in the horse and buggy days, when they didn't have cars, And when the horse and buggies were coming to pick up people to travel, kind of like a train station type thing, except there were no trains, they would blast these horns to let people know that they were on their way, so they would be ready to go aboard the horse and the buggy and then go off from there. It was like their horn. That's why it's called a carriage horn. Somebody picked this up in a yard sale for me. But this is the copper. I just wanted you to see this so you could compare it with the silver and with the nickel and with the gold. Now this one looks gold. I could have brought my bright gold saxophones, but I just had so much to carry today that I didn't. So I chose this so that you'd be able to see the gold. I polished this last night as well. This one is just a very inexpensive instrument. It's a penny whistle, but it plays very well in the key of D, and this is the gold. I'll switch it around so maybe you can see it better. It has a plastic top. These penny whistles are brass on the bottom and plastic on the top, either silver or gold, and the plastic tops can be in green, red, or blue. I have a number of these instruments in different keys and in different sizes. They do play quite well. Now, what I'm really interested in, though, let me put this to one side. What I'm really interested in are the flutes. I brought in 3 flutes. And I brought in a nickel plate, and I brought in a silver plate. So let me take a look here. I hope you'll be able to see it. This is a little sky flute, and this one is a silver plate. Now when you look at it, it's going to look somewhat gray. I've noticed before that when you get bright lights on an instrument that's silver, it tends to look gray. It's just the physics of it. If I tilt it like this, maybe you can see it better. Under the lights, when I'm looking at it, it's absolutely brilliant. But this is a little sky. It is a student model instrument, and I'm going to pick up and I'll compare the two. This is a nickel-plated instrument, and it looks black. Look at the difference. But they're both brilliant. In the light, they're both brilliant. One is nickel and one is silver. Now, I noticed, and I want to bring this up because I think this is important. When I was teaching at a fine arts center, I was the woodwind specialist, and I taught for a number of years at the Fine Arts Center. And I used to be doing concerts with students and so forth. And every so often, someone would come in after I'd done a solo or after I'd performed with a student and said, "Gee, that was very nice. You have a wonderful gray flute or a wonderful black flute." And I didn't know what they were talking about. What do you mean, gray flute? Well, it looks gray to me. And I noticed after that, I started looking at pictures, people that had taken pictures of myself and my students playing. In some of the pictures, they looked gray. And I thought, well, it's not gray, but this is the way the light reflects. The silver is probably the most reflective metal there is. Now, one of my friends told me yesterday that a silver instrument always plays better than a gold instrument. I don't know if this is true or not, but I do know that silver is more reflective with gold, and if you have something that's silver, it's going to shine. So when you get something shining on it, since it's reflective, it may just shine it back out again. So this here is my sky. I'm going to just check it. Yeah, this is my silver-plated flute. And it is very, very brilliant, and I'm sorry you can't see that better, but look at the grays. It's really brilliant. I'll just twist it in different directions and maybe you can see it. Now the nickel-plated flute looks a little better, a little different, but they're both bright. This happens to be an Artley. They're both student models. Let's see what we can get with a nickel plate. I knew when I got this flute, just before I was learning how to play flute, that it was bright, but it wasn't quite as bright as the silver plate. And I thought, well, there must be different colors to the silver. But you can see how gray that looks. But if you look, you can see glints of the silver. If I hold it like that, you can see glints of the silver. Well, if you're looking at like down to your left. You can see how the light is bouncing off from that. Now that is curious, but that's just a matter of physics, but I want to show you. And what happens, well, it was lacquered that way. When you buy an instrument for a child, they want color, they want bling, they want brightness. And I can remember even adults do too. Someone wanted me to pick out a flute for them. This is an adult. And they wanted me to pick out the flute so that they would be able to learn how to play it. And I says, I'll get the best flute I can, because the music store always let me pick out flutes for students, because they knew the students would, or parents would be buying the flutes from them. So I did that. And so when I got back and told her, that I said, I have a student coming in and they want to have the best flute within the price range they could pay, and I've chosen this one. They let me play every flute in the place until I got one I wanted. And so when she went in, they sold her the flute, and then she got angry with me. But it's not as shiny as the others. And I said, well, do you want a really good flute, one that's easy to play, or do you want one that just looks good? Now I want to show you this one here. This is going to be different. It's not going to be so bright. And if you look at it, parts of it will look gray. This is an Armstrong. It's a very, very, very nice flute. It's a beautiful flute, and it's a little tarnished. One thing about lacquering after a few years, the lacquering process, it can wear off a little bit, but it can always be re-lacquered. But this is gray. It really is gray. And if I polished it up, it would be shiny and bright, but it would start tarnishing again as soon as the air hit it. And within a week or two, it would start getting dark. There are certain places, I'm going to show you the bottom part of the flute, hold that up, and you can see that this is darker. But it's probably the best flute that I own, because it's just a high quality, wonderful flute. Now where it does have some shine is where I put my fingers to play it, because I'm rubbing up against those fingers, or rubbing up against the instrument. So there's a contact between my fingers, and by the way, this is the correct way to hold the flute, and then you hold it out like that, and you put your mouth on the mouthpiece. Anything that you rub against it will make it shine a little bit and take a little bit of that tarnish off. But this is a gray flute, an Armstrong. It's a professional quality instrument. It's a very nice instrument. It doesn't shine like the others, but it is an extremely good flute. Now what I want to do is explain, what do you lacquer, what can you dye, what kind of instrument it takes coloring. So I'm going to show you some definitions, and then we can go through the definitions. So it'll be on this chart here. Thank you, that's good. Lacquering, the lacquering process, it's a coat that you put on an instrument that gives a smooth finish. If you plate an instrument, this is metal that is covered with color, either mechanically, electronically, or chemically. And this is what would happen with the flutes that I brought in today. They would be put, the color would be put on either mechanically, electronically, or chemically. And you can plate in either gold, silver, nickel, or copper. Dyeing is a liquid that contains color. Now you have to handle wood differently than you handle some of the brass, because that's an indifferent process. You cannot put plating on a wooden instrument or a plastic instrument. You can only put plating on brass. Okay, now a stain is a dye that's made into a solution, and it's made to color wood, and it will penetrate the wood, and it will give it kind of a nice appearance. Let me just show you. Here's one of the flutes I brought in. It's not like a regular flute, but it's a flute that I brought in that's wood, and there is a gloss to it. You can tell a little bit as I turn it around. There is a gloss to it. It's covered, it's varnished with something. Now you would not be able to put a plate on it to give it color like silver or gold. It is wood, but you can see that there is some kind of a gloss to it. It's made out of wood, and that's what it looks like. And also I have, and I'm going to show this to you too, this is a recorder that it's a gill recorder. It's a very nice recorder. Gill makes great recorders. I usually don't bring it in, but this was made out of Israeli wood, and the wood is cedar. So if I hold this up, you don't get, I can see a gloss, but I'm not sure that you can pick it up. It has kind of been varnished or stained or something, but it is cedar. And different colors of wood show how much work has been done with them. For example, next segment I'm going to go into the clarinets. And the clarinets, the darker they are, if they're wood, the more oil they have absorbed, but there's a process in there. So let me go on with this. Let's see, varnish is a combination of rosins. Rosins are vegetable materials, plant materials that are dissolved either in oil or in alcohol, and they can be applied to wood or metal. Usually not metal though, but basically wood, and it dries and leaves a hard, glossy, transparent coating. You can actually see the instrument. You know, it's covered with a coating, it's glossy, but you can see the grain of the wood. So it leaves a hard, glossy, transparent coating. Rosin is taken from plants, and it makes a varnish, and that's what's used to give some color. Now, brass is a metal alloy. What is alloy? It's when you get two elements together. Metal alloy of copper and zinc together, you get an alloy. Two or more metals together will make an alloy. Copper is an element. It's a metal, reddish brown in color, and as I showed you the carriage horn, you can see that. So what is tarnish? It's a deposit, a kind of a grayish or sometimes rusty looking deposit on the surface of metal, and the metal has combined with oxygen, and that's what the tarnish is. The metal has combined with oxygen, and you have molecules of silver and sulfur together, and that's what makes tarnish, and then that can be polished off. Now, lacquer has advantages. The advantages of using lacquer on brass are these. For one thing, it's perspiration resistant, and it can air dry. There's not a lot of chemical processes involved. You can put it on and it will air dry. It's chemical resistant, it applies easily, it's ready to use when it's dry, and it's repairable, and it gives a very excellent appearance. Brass instruments are shiny and they're bright and they're beautiful in color, and as I mentioned before, copper, gold, silver, and nickel. The wooden instruments are not plated. You cannot plate wood, you cannot plate plastics. You remember, I don't know if you remember this or not, you probably aren't old enough, but years and years and years ago, women used to polish their silverware, and they spent hours, usually on a weekend, just polishing silver. Now with the plating process, they don't have to do that. Everything you get is all shiny. You don't have to do it by polishing. Tarnish is when you get silver and silver sulfide together, and it forms some silver and sulfur atoms, and the sulfur is found in the air and in eggs, and that helps to cause tarnish. And you polish the silver and you get that tarnish off. That's what used to happen. Now, how can you clean? I gotta wash I guess we have time to do this. How can you clean silver fast if you have that old kind of silver? I'll give you a list. I've never done this, but I know it works. You line a steel pot. You cannot use an aluminum pot, but you have a steel pot, and you line it with aluminum foil on the bottom and on the sides. You put water in it. You don't put your silverware in it yet, but you have enough water to cover the silver when you get it in. You add the water, and then for each quart of water, you add 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And when the soda has dissolved, then you put the silverware in. You bring the pot to a boil, and in minutes the tarnish has disappeared from your silverware, but the aluminum foil has turned dark. The aluminum foil has drawn all the tarnish away from the silver. It becomes dark, and then the silverware becomes bright. You know, so the water that you add is, then you add cool water, just rinse it off, dry it, and put it away, and you're all set. So this gives you a little idea. Silver is one element, and it has one type of molecule. It has a high degree of polish and reflection, and it's the most reflective of all the metals. And let's see, electrodeposition is when you deposit nickel and copper by electrical action. Stainless steel is steel with chromium, and it does not rust. You cannot rust stainless steel, and steel is a form of iron containing carbon. Pewter is a combination of tin plus copper. So when you're dealing with instruments like the flute, the saxophone, it's, you know, you just need to know what goes into the process in making them shiny and bright. You're not going to get any instrument that's going to be of different colors unless it's something that you can make out of plastic, because you can get plastic in any color. Well, we're about out of time, so I'm going to close it here, and I hope this answers some questions or just gives you some information as to the process of getting instruments that are not plastic, that have different colors to them, but instruments that have a natural patina on them, and what you do to get them shiny and bright. Next time, I'm going to be talking about clarinets. How do you make a clarinet? And what's the difference between a wooden and a plastic clarinet? And how do you take care of it? And that's just something that it would be interesting, I think, to find out. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.